Hey everyone, today I'm going to be going through Blueprint of Life 1.1 for Biology Year 12. As a part of your HSC, you're required to outline the impact on the evolution of plants and animals of changes in the physical conditions in the environment, changes in the chemical conditions in the environment, and competition for resources. So first off, let's have a little look at evolution. Evolution. Now, what is similar in organisms? What is the basis in organisms? So, most are mainly made up of proteins, carbohydrates, fats, and DNA. So, most organisms are mainly made up of these couple of elements, and that's particularly true. Then you've got DNA is the basic genetic material. Now, for most organisms, it's just common knowledge that the genetics and everything is based off this DNA that they have inside them. And lastly, enzymes control reactions. So you might have learned a little bit about this in maintaining a balance, or if you haven't done it yet, then no worries, but you will learn about it whenever you do it. And it is an absolute essential part in the entire syllabus. Okay, cool. So why do they have these similarities? Like, if you guys are talking about evolution and all these different type of organisms, why do they all have these bases and like these similarities? Well, they all have this because they've got one common ancestor. They all have this one common ancestor for one, and number two, they've all evolved from pre-existing organisms. So there is this one organism that they've all evolved from, and therefore they have these similarities. And lastly, they've changed over millions of years. Okay, cool. Let's move on. So now, evolution in the environment. As we know, the dot point asks for three things. It asks for changes in the physical conditions, changes in the chemical conditions, and then lastly, not related to environment, but competition for resources. It could be related to the environment, actually. But anyways, let's go through that. So, for first, we've got the physical features, which are wind, temperature, and water. When I talk about wind, we talk about how much wind, and the quantity of wind, just any measure of wind. Same goes for temperature, and same goes for water. When I say water, I mean the availability of water, or how much water was available. But pretty much the same thing, but it's just all measurements in the physical factors. So in the environment, depending on how much wind there was, what the temperature was, and the availability of water, or even any one of these individual factors, evolution could have occurred because of these reasons. Now we've got the chemical environment. Now the chemical environment is a very wide area to delve into, and at first Earth had minimal amounts of oxygen and carbon dioxide, so that meant that no complex organisms could really inhabit Earth, and therefore we've got this increase. These amounts have increased over time, and therefore more complex organisms formed. So that's a simple example of some of the chemical environments on Earth which have allowed for evolution to occur. Alright, now going further into this, there are changes in the concentration of chemicals or the pressure, presence or absence of them. So for example, salt in the soil or water, gas, and the Ddt story. So the Ddt story, I haven't written out the entire thing, but that's what I'll explain right now. Ddt was a pesticide which was developed in the early 1930s to 1950s, and what actually happened is that Ddt allowed for any pest to die off whenever it hit the certain crop or whatever it was which was sprayed with Ddt. Now, the thing that happened is that mosquitoes in particular, they, over time, produce a resistance to Ddt. In Africa, Ddt was very commonly used in order to prevent malaria, which is a very common disease. And after some time, these mosquitoes, which were suddenly dying off because of this Ddt sprayed everywhere and used everywhere, through natural selection, a mosquito must have had a mutation after reproduction. The baby mosquito or whatever must have had this mutation which allowed it to survive this Ddt. Now, whatever this mutation was, it obviously allowed for it to survive, and then hence, when that mosquito reproduced, more mosquitoes which could survive against Ddt produced, and then the cycle goes on. So Ddt ended up becoming they ended up becoming a higher resistance to Ddt, and therefore this is a chemical change which has allowed for an organism, which is the mosquitoes or whatever pests, to have this evolutionary trait through natural selection to actually survive this Ddt. Cool. So let's move on to the next thing. evolution and competition for resources. Now, long-term competition usually leads to the extinction or either one of the species ultimately, moving to a different ecosystem or a different niche. Now, because of this, the evolved species would have similar or slightly different resources. All this is trying to say is that because of this competition, it could lead to because of these factors, it could lead to things such as the organism moving ecosystems completely, or to a completely different niche. But how at the end, it's always usually similar or slightly different resources. So like the food it has, and the amount of light, and all the other factors combined, it should be either same or similar, slightly different. Alright, now the last thing I wanted to mention was that when competition does occur, food resources can be quite deplenished, and also it can be quite difficult for organisms to find food. So competition isn't exactly the best thing, but sometimes it does lead to evolutionary traits to occur. Alright, so that pretty much sums .1.1, and that is all for Blueprint of Life .1.1. Thanks for watching.